السلام عليكم. الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Anbiya, the messengers of God, are all supposed to be role models and exemplify righteousness and virtues. If we study their stories, we find that each went through certain tests and hardships in their lives and passed their tests with flying colors. That is why we honor them, revere them, and try to follow their footsteps as we try to implement their way of living. One of the most prominent virtues prophets possessed was their patience and perseverance in completing their mission. Today, we are going to talk about this virtue, which is patience, and discuss an example given in the Qur'an in Surat Anbiya, the prophets, chapter 21, verses 83 through 88. These verses start with the story of Job, or Ayyub alayhi salam, in chapter 21. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وأيوب إذ نادى ربه أني مسني الضر وأنت أرحم الراحمين. And remember Ayyub, Job, when he cried out to his Lord and said, affliction has befallen me, but of all those who show mercy, you are the most merciful. Verse 83. There are numerous reports about what happened to Ayyub alayhi salam, some of which are clearly exaggerated. Some suggest that he suffered an illness that made people turn away from him, unable to look at him. We have no reliable evidence to support this. It is indeed contrary to what a messenger of God is like. Ayyub's story is mentioned in the Torah, Old Testament, as well, and in fact, a set of chapters named after him. In chapter 2, it says, for example, so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. He replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? This is in Job chapter 2, verses 7 through 10. What Quranic texts suggest, however, is that he suffered hardship within himself and within his family. As dhurra means hardship and distress, physical or otherwise, which is more than enough as a test for anyone. Ayyub's story is one of the finest that centers on a test. Quranic texts mentioning Ayyub only speak in general terms, giving few details. In this particular instance, the surah mentions Ayyub's supplication and God's response because the overall atmosphere of the surah is one of grace bestowed from high on his prophets and how he takes care of them when he tests them. This applies in all test situations, including rejection by their own people, as with Abraham, Lut, and Nuh, power and wealth, as with David and Solomon, or hardship with Ayyub, peace be upon them all. Ayyub's prayer, as mentioned here, does not go beyond describing his condition and emphasizing God's attribute. As it says, and remember Ayub when he cried out to his Lord, affliction has befallen me, and of all those who show mercy, you are the most merciful. In verse 83. You notice after he says, Inni massaniya dhurru, affliction has befallen me, he does not appeal for his condition to be changed. He does not specifically ask to be cured because he wants to remain patient in adversity. Nor does he suggest anything to his Lord because his is an attitude of perfect humbleness before Allah. And as a Muslim, he submits and surrenders to his Lord and considers whatever Allah decides for him to be the best for him. Thus, he is God's model servant and worshipper, neither panicking in a situation of adversity nor expressing frustration at the hardship he endures. Indeed, his is considered a test of the highest severity. He is reluctant even to pray to God to lift his hardship. Therefore, what does he say next? وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And of all those who show mercy, you are the most merciful. Therefore, he leaves the matter entirely to Allah, who is the most merciful and most kind, and knowing that Allah knows his situation and will give him what is best for him. How many of us can be as patient when we experience a hardship, an illness, or mishap, or when we don't get that promotion or lose a loved one, or something as simple as standing in a line or in a traffic? In story of Ayub alayhi salam, the Qur'an tells us at the peak of his hardship, he turns to Allah and appeals to him, never losing his patience. At the moment Ayub addressed his Lord with such confidence and humbleness, his prayer was answered as God's grace was bestowed on him. At this point, his test was over. فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ فَكَشَفْنَا مَا بِهِ مِنْ ضُرٍّ وَآتَيْنَاهُ أَهْلَهُ وَمِثْلُهُمْ مَعَهُمْ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا وَذِكْرَى لِلْعَابِدِينَ. We responded to him and removed the affliction he suffered. We restored to him his family and as many more with them. Verse 84. His personal affliction was removed and his health was restored. This indicates complete recovery, leaving no trace of illness. The affliction which concerned his family was also lifted. God compensated him for the one he had lost by giving him twice as many. It is said that he had lost some of his children during this hardship period, and God gave him twice their number, or he might have given him grandchildren. All this was as rahmatan min indina, an act of grace from us, because every blessing is an act of God's grace. It was also وَذِكْرَى لِلْعَابِدِينَ, a reminder to all who worship, all who serve us. It reminds them of God and the tests He may put us through, and of His grace that He will not fail to follow the hardship. Hardship is always followed by ease. إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Indeed, hardship is followed by relief. Ayub's case provides an example for all mankind, and his patient endurance sets a model for all to follow. This reference to those who worship us or serve us within the context of hard tests is especially significant here. The whole matter is very serious. You see, faith, iman, is a trust which is given only to those who are able to shoulder its responsibility and endure its hardship. It is not mere words carelessly uttered by anyone. In this case, a reminder to our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and all of his followers, past and present and future, going through hardships of their own, that Allah's mercy, grace, and relief is around the corner for all his servants and worshippers. Bearing Muslim identity and its responsibility often may not be easy and may require enduring. Enduring what? Hardship from time to time, for which we must be ready, as our early Muslim brethren did. Now, in Surah Sad, the story of Ayub is further explained in the following verses. Remember our servant Ayub, who cried out to his Lord, Shaitan has afflicted me with hardship and suffering. And it was said to him, strike the ground with your foot. This spring is a cool water to wash and a refreshing drink. We restored his family to him and doubled their number as an act of grace from us, and as a reminder to those who are endowed with insight. It was said to him, take in your hand a bunch of grass and strike with it, and you will not then break your oath. We found him patient in adversity, an excellent servant of ours who would always turn to us. Chapter 38, verses 41 through 44. By the way, according to Torah, Ayub was afflicted with pain and hardship, and furthermore was hurt and taunted even by his own family, his wife included. But he never complained and was never unthankful to God. Back to above verses 41 through 44, that is why verse relates to him as Abdana, our servant, meaning he followed our will. He attributes the evil pain and suffering, both physical and mental, to Shaitan. And the fact Shaitan used to whisper in his ear to question Allah's will and to say, why this, why that, and complain. The fact his cure came from the spring with cool water to drink from and wash with was a miracle because he was completely cured. So obviously this spring was different than the mineral water or hot springs we sometimes go to relieve pain. These verses then imply that he suffered for a long time, during which his family spread out and left him, and perhaps he lost some of his children over this period. As the verse says, وَوَهَبْنَا لَهُ أَهْلَهُ وَمِثْلَهُمْ مَعَهُمْ. We restored his family to him and doubled their number, which the verse says was an eventual grace from Allah after his patience and endurance as an example to future generations. However, other reports say that he had a few well-wishers who remained faithful to him, including his wife, but eventually Shaitan tried to convince them, even his own close family, that if God loved Ayub, he would not have subjected him to such a severe situation. Sounds familiar? Much like what some people say today when they are faced with hardship or illness and start asking why this, why that, why did God let this happen to me, or where is God, or why God has forsaken me. In fact, when they put such questions onto Ayub, that was harder for him than the test itself, the pain itself. Later, even his wife started whispering, why? And Ayub was very upset, very upset. He swore that should God restore his health, should he get well, he would punish her for her blasphemous statements and questions, specifying even the number of times he would strike her, which is said to be 100. At this point, Ayub alayhi salam complained to God about the trouble Shaitan's schemes and whispers were causing him, through his wife and family, of course. As the verse says, Shaitan has afflicted me with hardship and suffering, in verse 41. When he had proved his sincerity beyond any doubt, and when he had rejected all Shaitan's attempts to weaken him, God bestowed his grace on him, ending his test and restoring his health. He ordered him to hit the ground with his foot, and a cool spring would gush out. He was to wash himself with its water and drink from it. This was enough for him to recover his health. As the verse says, strike the ground with your foot. This spring is a cool water for you to wash and a refreshing drink. The surah then states, we restored his family to him and doubled their number as an act of grace from us, and as a reminder to those who are endowed with insight. In verse 43. Some reports suggest that God gave him a similar number of sons. It may actually be that the Quranic statement means that when his health was restored, he regained his family that he had almost lost. He also gave him more as additional favors. This serves as a reminder to those who have insight, to those who understand. God also bestowed his grace on Ayub and his wife with regard to the oath he had made about punishing her. She had, of course, looked after him during most his days of hardship. Therefore, God ordered Ayub to take in his hand a handful of dried, soft sticks, equal to the numbers he had stated in his oath, that he would strike her with the handful bunch only once. And this is like, holding a bunch of grass in your hand or soft sticks. In this way, he would fulfill his oath. So it was said to him, take in your hand a bunch of grass or soft dried sticks and strike with it, and you will not then break your oath. Verse 44. This also shows the significance and seriousness of swearing to Allah to do something. Once one swears to Allah to do something, he pledges as such, and he must fulfill it. Such care and blessing were in return for what God knew of Ayyub's patience in adversity. His being a model of obedience, always turning to Allah for support, as verse 44 ends the passage beautifully, as it says, we found him patient in adversity, an excellent servant of ours, who would always turn to us. Back to chapter 21, which is the chapter of our discussion, and the next verse says, وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ وَإِدْرِيسَ وَذَا الْكِفْلِ كُلٌّ مِّنَ الصَّابِرِينَ. And remember Ismail, Idris, and the Kefl, all were among the patient. Verse 84. Here you can see the main theme of this passage is sabr, patience, as the Qur'an continues with three other prophets, with all three the quality of patience in adversity is highlighted. Ismail alayhi salam showed his patience when he was required to submit himself for sacrifice, and he duly did so, saying to his father Abraham, peace be upon him, قال يا أبت افعل ما تؤمر ستجدني إن شاء الله من الصابرين. My dear father, do that which you are commanded. Allah willing, you will find me among those who are patient. Chapter 37, verse 102. As for Idris, as we noted earlier, we know nothing about his time or where he lived. He is mentioned in the Qur'an twice, as Qur'an describes him as a man of truth and a prophet. Some people suggest that he was Osiris, whom the Egyptians worshipped after his death, and invented some legends concerning him. He is said to have been the first teacher of mankind from whom farming and industry were learned. But we have no evidence to support this. We just need to know that he was patient and that he merits a record in God's book. Dhul-Kifl is also unknown. We cannot determine when or where he lived. Perhaps he was one of the Israelite prophets or among their most pious and God-fearing people. It is also said that before one of their prophets died, he guaranteed, Dhul-Kifl guaranteed that he would take care of the children of Israel, giving a pledge that he would spend the nights in worship, fast during the day, and not allow anger to take hold of him when he judged among the people in disputes. He honored all his commitments. It is said that he was called Dhul-Kifl because of this, since his name refers to such practices, and it means the one giving a guarantee or guardianship. But none of these details is supported by evidence. The Quranic text here is sufficient to credit him with being patient in adversity, a highly rewarding quality. And then says, وَأَدْخَلْنَاهُمْ فِي رَحْمَتِنَا إِنَّهُمْ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. We admitted them to our mercy, for they were among the righteous. Verse 85. Here the surah adds another quality of Ayyub, Ismail, Idris, and Dhul-Kifl, which was their righteousness and good deeds. In other words, Allah did not admit them to His grace and mercy without a reason. The qualities mentioned, the patience and righteousness, being the reason why they are mentioned in this surah. Considering their mission and people whom they dealt with, all prophets of God exemplified patience and constancy. They were patient through hardships, calamities, and patient with their own human instincts and desires. Such patience demonstrates the level of endurance, perseverance, and power a person has over all that is ill. That said, there are times or special cases where Qur'an invites to the opposite and invites to fight and not wait. That is when a society and or community is faced with a form of injustice and a threat. Next, the surah, within the same context, moves to the story of another prophet, as it says, وَذَنُّونِ إِذْ ذَهَبَ مُغَاضِبًا فَظَنَّ أَنْ لَنْ نَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ فَنَادَى فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ إِنِّي كُنْتُ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْغَمِّ وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِيَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And remember the noon, when he went off in anger, thinking that we would not force him into a tight situation. But he cried out in depths of darkness, saying, "There is no God but you. Glory to you. I have done wrong indeed." We answered his prayer and saved him from his grief, sorrow. And thus do we deliver those who have faith, those with Iman. Chapter 21, verses 87 through 88. Here we have a brief outline of Yunus alayhi salam, or Jonah, whom the Qur'an calls the Noon, or man of the whale, because he was swallowed by the whale and then thrown out. The reason his name is not mentioned and instead he is referred to as a man of the whale is because Allah wants us to remember Yunus with this particular and unusual incident that happened to him and what led to this incident, plus how Allah saved him from the belly of the whale. He was sent to a particular city where he called on its people to believe in one God, but they rejected both him and his message. By the way of response to their stubbornness, he left in anger. He showed little inclination to preserve, his cool, as we say, and persevere with them on account of their rejection, and rushed in his judgment, basically. He thought that God would not restrict him to a particular place, given there were many cities and communities, and that he could therefore be directed to go there and invite people to his deen. This is what is meant by the expression rendered here as فَذَنَّ أَن لَن نَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ, thinking that we would not force him into a tight situation. Angry and frustrated, he walked away and found himself sometime later by the sea, where he saw a loaded boat, full boat. He boarded it, and when the boat was in the middle of the sea, it was apparent that its load was too heavy. The shipmaster said that one passenger must be thrown overboard in order to give the rest a chance to survive. They all drew sticks like a lottery, and the draw fell onto Yunus. The other passengers threw him into the sea, or he might have jumped himself overboard. It was then that the whale swallowed him, and he found himself in a most tight situation. He felt shrouded by several layers of darkness. فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ means the darkness of the whale's belly, the darkness of the deep blue sea, and the darkness of the night. At this moment, he cried out, "La ilaha illa ant, subhanaka inni kuntu minal zalimin." There's no God but you. There's no deity but you. Glory to you. I have done wrong indeed. God answered his prayer and saved him from the distress he was suffering. The whale therefore threw him out near the shore. The remainder of his story is taken up in chapter 37, verses 139 through 148. As it says, "And indeed Yunus was among the messengers. Remember when he ran away to the loaded ship, and he drew sticks, and he was among the losers. Then the big fish swallowed him. While he was blameworthy, and had he not been of those who exalt God, he would have remained inside its belly until the day they are resurrected. But we threw him onto the open shore while he was ill, and we caused to grow over him a gourd vine, to give him shade. And we sent him to his people of 100,000 or more, and they believed. So we gave them enjoyment of life for a time. Chapter 37, verses 139 through 148. Then there's the following verse in the chapter called Yunus, regarding his people who were the only ones who accepted his invitation to Allah and all became believers. As the Qur'an asks, why didn't other nations also believe like the people of Yunus did? فَلَوْلَا كَانَتْ قَرْيَةٌ آمَنَتْ فَنَفَعَهَا إِيمَانُهَا إِلَّا قَوْمَ يُونُسَ لَمَّا آمَنُوا كَشَفْنَا عَنْهُمْ عَذَابَ الْخِزْيِ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَمَتَّعْنَاهُمْ إِلَى حِينٍ. Then why has there not been a single city that believed and benefited from its faith except the people of Yunus? When they believed, we removed from them the punishment of disgrace in this life and gave them enjoyment or provision for a time. Chapter 10, verse 98. The first part of this verse is a reproach, as it asserts that majority of prophets faced opposition and stubbornness to their message from their own people. And of course, they began to believe as the punishment approached. These people began to believe as the punishment came, and they knew that punishment is coming, which was, at that point, believing was of no benefit to them and did not save them. Then in the second part is, as the verse implies, belief under compulsion has no benefit. It relates to an example where people of a town who believed on their own free will benefited them, and they got to enjoy the rest of their lives, and that was the people of Yunus alayhi salam. While he was gone, as they realized and appreciated his message, hence believed, which was a surprise to Yunus alayhi salam as he returned to them. Perhaps Allah titles a whole chapter, Surah, chapter 10, named after Yunus alayhi salam, because the whole chapter's theme is to encourage those who reject the message. They should consider the people of Yunus and reflect just like them and save themselves from the punishment that is waiting for them. So now there are some significant points and lessons in Yunus' story we need to reflect upon. First, Yunus did not initially show enough patience and willingness to endure the difficulties of delivering God's message. He quickly became fed up, abandoned his people, and moved on, angry and frustrated. He felt his situation to be very tight, but God exposed him to a much tighter and harder distress as compared with the opposition of unbelievers. Had Yunus not turned to his Lord in repentance and admitted that he had wronged himself by leaving his duty, he would not have been relieved of his distress. It was God's care and grace that saved him. Verse 88 gives hope to all the believers that after we lapse, we make mistakes and find our mistakes and sincerely call our Rabb and ask for his forgiveness, he will forgive us and bestow his mercy upon us. The end of verse 88 says, وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِيَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and this is how we deliver, we save the believers, those who have Iman. Did not say this is how we saved Yunus or our prophets, it says this is how we save any believer. So the verse is not exclusive, and God's grace is not exclusive to Yunus. You know, beyond our daily lives and the personal calamities, hardships, difficulties that might come our way, for which we need to be patient and persevere, we must do so when it comes to our deen as well. The advocates of truth must be ready to bear the burden involved in such advocacy. Remain patient in the face of rejection and vicious opposition. When a person is certain of the truth of the message he advocates, he finds the opposition of people who cause him distress, and then accuse him of false inventions and deliberate lying, difficult to handle. Yet, to remain patient in the face of such adversity is only part of the duties, and in our case, the invitation to Islam. The way a message must follow in order to touch people's hearts is neither easy nor comfortable. Positive responses may not be forthcoming. A great heap of false beliefs, erring practices, superstitions, customs, traditions, and situations weigh heavily on people's hearts and minds. This heap must be removed, and hearts must be revived in every possible way. As they say, every sensitive receptor must be touched to find the effective nerve. We are often surprised that 1,000 attempts may be made with one particular person, but without success. Then a casual gesture coming at the right time touches the right chord, and the person concerned goes through a complete transformation without any difficulty. A comparison can be made with let's say you're trying to find a particular radio station. You turn the knob, the tuning knob, back and forth, but you miss it despite taking full care to find it. Then suddenly, a casual touch may hit it, and we enjoy a good reception. The human heart is akin to a radio receiver. Advocates of the divine message must try hard to find the right spot that enables every heart to receive that message. When 1,000 attempts have failed, the next one may succeed. It is easy for us to get angry in our daily lives when something goes wrong, as well as when we're advocating the divine message, when people might turn away from us. To give up and quit is always easy. It may enable us to cool down. If we're angry, we should remain patient. It is infinitely better for us not to lose heart and not to give up. An advocate is merely a tool in God's hand, and God preserves his message better than us. We must fulfill our duty, however hard that this duty may sound or may feel like, and the opposition that we may face. We then leave the matter to God, and he gives guidance to whomever he pleases. In other words, the result is in his hand. The attempt is from us, and the result is in his hand. In the story of Yunus, we thus have a good example to reflect upon. His return to his Lord and acknowledgement of his error provide a good lesson. Furthermore, in the grace God showed him, answering the prayer he made through the layers of darkness, gives us great hope. As the verse says, thus we deliver or save those who have faith, those with Iman. End of verse 88. In conclusion, what is important in the stories related in this surah, the few verses we talked about, is that they show how God bestows favors and grace on his servants, true servants, and not just the prophets. Although he subjects them to greatest tests, they remain patient in adversity, enduring their hardship with assured forbearance, knowing that whatever God decides is ultimately good. Ultimately good. We ask Allah to make his tests easy for us and remove our hardships, illnesses, and distress. We ask Allah to grant us patience in facing challenges. We ask Allah to make us among his sincere and righteous servants. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wal asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Assalamu alaikum.